This is Ben Davidson.
This is Leighton Gray.
This is Tanner Naday.
This is Tom Luongo.
This is Chuck Prodnick.
This is Alex Kreiner.
This is Jim St. Clair. Welcome to the Shaun Newman Podcast.
Welcome to the podcast, folks. Happy Thursday. How's everybody doing today? Yeah, we have had a busy stretch, you know? I was like, I was talking the other day, the weekend review's a day late, and then it didn't get put out. And I was like trying to get it put out again, and I didn't get it put out. So, you know, like on this side of things, the old one-man band routine caught up with me today, this week, I should say. It has been a great stretch, like a ton of great content. But I mean, to put it in perspective, 5 podcasts plus pretty much a live stream once a week for anywhere between, what were we saying last night, 4 to 6 plus hours. It has been a busy, busy stretch. A great stretch. We've had lots of great feedback from all you folks that have been tuning in, paying attention. And today, we got an interesting one, obviously, coming up here. And that's, I want to get you to that. So how about we start here? Precious metals can be thought of as the ultimate insurance policy against economic uncertainty and government incompetence, with deficit spending and fiscal irresponsibility unlikely to end anytime soon. Now is the time to protect a portion of your hard-earned savings with a form of money that has been recognized for thousands of years. Yes, I'm talking about silver, gold, bull, and I'm talking about silver and gold, as they are my go-to for precious metals with their complete in-house solutions, whether buying, selling, storing, or adding precious metals to your retirement accounts. They have a new feature exclusively for you that allows you to buy Royal Canadian Mint silver coins for the same price as generic silver rounds. Text or email Grahame down in the show notes for more details. McGowan, Kristen McGowan, that is, she's running for school board trustee. You got to hear her earlier this week on the podcast. She's running for school board trustee. She's got 3 things that she's been paying attention to and wants to see addressed in the next election: parental rights and inclusive education policies, funding and resource allocation, and curriculum changes, and the why do I have so many ands in there? I don't know why I did that to myself. And monitoring of new testing policies adopted. I'm like, as I read that, that's Shaun's language, not Kristen's. She's way better spoken than I just put in there. You can, the election's November 13th, and pay attention for her name coming up in the Northwest School Division election. That should be interesting there. Substack, it's free to subscribe to. Obviously, I'm not blowing your email up. I can't even get out a bloody weekend review this week because of how hard I've been pushing getting to the UCP AGM, and then on and on and on. I'm not making excuses. I am making excuses, but regardless, we're not going to blow up your email, folks. We just want you to pay attention to what's going on with the SMP. The Substack is going to keep you up to date, and it's free to subscribe to. You can also become a paid member on there, and we try and add in a few things to make, hopefully value add for you. Friday, November 29th, SMP Christmas Party. We got 3 tables left. Dueling Pianos, Gold Horse Casino. We're down to 3. So if you are dragging your feet, don't drag them anymore because we're running out of time, folks. The Cornerstone Forum returns May 10th, 2025. May 10th, 2025. Yes, that is coming to Calgary at the Winsport. And we got Tom Luongo, Alex Kreiner, Chuck Prodnick, going to all be speaking. Guest host Chris Sims, Tom Bodrovics, Kaylin Ford's been added to the show. We're adding a trade show this year, so we're going to have some companies there. And early bird tickets are up. Down in the show notes, scroll down there. Cheap tickets. They're going to be the cheapest ticket you get. As we get closer, the prices are going to be going up. So make sure you grab a ticket to the Cornerstone Forum in Calgary. That's going to be a ton of fun. All right, let's get on to that. Tale of the tape. He was the 14th Premier of Saskatchewan. He served from 2007 to 2018. I'm talking about Brad Wall. So buckle up. Here we go. Welcome to the Shaun Newman Podcast. Today, I'm joined by Brad Wall. Thank you, sir, for hopping on.
Hey, thanks for having me, Shaun. It's good to be here.
I don't want to spend a ton of time on this because I already know that people know who you are. But at the same time, maybe somebody is from, down in the States, far side of Canada, is kind of like me. What didn't grow up a political nerd and now is starting to become a political nerd.
Welcome to that club. We should
exactly.
We should have like hats and shirts for you for when someone like you sort of joins the nerd club. You should get some. People should know it.
Well, I just paid, you'll get a kick out of this. I just paid a babysitter and bought pizza for the kids so I could watch a municipal debate of local politics. And I went like, this is where I'm at now. Do I tune into the Oiler game? Well, maybe sometimes, but right now, like Jamie Sinclair, shout out to Jamie, was texting me about the Rough Rider game. I'm like, I didn't even know what was going on. Like, I'm so focused on what's going on politically. I've become that person. So yeah, thanks to the world for that.
Yeah.
Now, Brad, give everybody just a little bit of a background on you. It's the first time you've been on the show. I don't think you need much of an introduction, but heck, like I say, that we do have listeners across Canada into the States. There's going to be people who don't know who you are.
Well, sure. I mean, I am. I'm also a political nerd. I have been since grade 6, where I may have harbored ambitions and hopes to just represent my hometown of Swift Current somewhere at the provincial or the federal level. I didn't care, but I was interested, for since then. So a long, long time. In a long story short, I ran when the Saskatchewan Party was formed in August of '97, when Liberals and Conservatives came together and said, "Look, we agree on far more than divides us. Why would we split the vote and let the NDP win majority governments with 40% of the popular vote?" That got my interest in politics again. I had been interested in it prior to that, been involved in it prior to that in youth politics. I was a political staffer in a provincial government, but I had left it alone for about 8 years. And that sort of really garnered my interest and attracted my attention to this new party, the Saskatchewan Party. Sought the nomination of Swift Current, was lucky enough to win it, very fortunate enough to win September 16th, 1999, in the provincial election where the Sask Party actually won the popular vote, but didn't win a majority of the seats. And so we were off and running. And we had another go at it in '03, an election we all thought we could win. And our leader at the time, Alwyn Hermanson, thought we could win as well. And though I don't think it was his fault, he decided in the wake of that loss to Calvert to step down. And then I ran for the leadership, which I got on the Ides of March. Not a great day to be selected leader of some political group, of the Ides of March 2003. And then obviously we started to work very hard in opposition to try to earn the trust of many people in urban Saskatchewan. And we'll talk more about that relative to the most provincial election. And we were fortunate enough to win in '07 and again in '11. And then in 2016, we were lucky enough to win again. And then I stepped away. I had always thought, Shaun, I knew that in that last term after the 2016 election, I had pretty much decided I'm not going to run again. So then the decision is the timing of my exit. And so I chose for, my own reasons, but I thought it through and I thought we need to have a budget brought down in Saskatchewan that moves us away from resource revenue dependency. And that's going to be a tough budget. That's going to involve cuts, and it did. That'll things like when we basically we ended a long time Crown corporation called STC, a bus company that had that notionally, I guess, or theoretically provided services to the whole province, but we figured out that taxpayers were subsidizing every rider on that bus $100 a seat, a ticket. And so that was an example of a tough call because a lot of people in rural Saskatchewan use that bus service for healthcare or the part service brings them parts on their farm. And that was a tough one. And then we made some revenue decisions, also difficult. But we did not expand, put the PST on used vehicles. We had taken that off as a part of an '07 election. That happened subsequent. But we did expand it. We expanded the PST. I think a lot of economists would probably tell you a fairer tax, even than a progressive income tax, is a sales tax. Although, so long as the necessities aren't part of the base, but we did expand the base and increased it by a point. Not a very popular budget at all. I called it the Buckley's mixture budget. It tasted awful, but I thought that would work. I still call it that. But my point is this, Shaun. I wanted to do that budget knowing I wouldn't be around for the next election. The next person shouldn't have that. Maybe I could, take a little bit of the unpopularity of that off with me when I went. And so in 2017, I announced I wasn't running again. And since then, well, I've started a business, a consulting business that's been busier than I thought it would be. I didn't really know what to expect, but I'm on a few boards here and there that I enjoy very much. I guess I'm a partner in not I guess I am a partner in a yearling operation with our son Coulter, who's moved back shortly after the pandemic, moved back from the States. And I'm ostensibly I'm the silent partner, although I think when I told Coulter that I plan to be the silent partner, he might have said something like, "Oh, 18 years in politics and now you're going to be the silent partner." I try to be silent when fencing day comes around. I'm generally pretty silent and just gone for that. But so that's what we're doing now. We're living in Cypress Hills. We moved from Swift Current to Cypress Hills, Saskatchewan in May of 20. And there's your update. I filibustered my own introduction, but there you go.
No, it's perfect. What I want to know is, there's so much to cover here, and I want to put this out to the listener. Brad says to me, nobody wants to listen to me talk. And I laugh at that because I just listen to that. I'm like, oh man, I got so many questions. I want to know, wow, man. Okay, let's get to the most relevant topic because it just happened. U.S. election. What did you think of Trump, Harris, and everything?
I was surprised. I mean, I thought it would be close, and I wasn't just reading sort of mainstream media or the sources on social media that might have confirmation bias about an anti-Trump vote and how well Harris was doing since the Democratic Party basically just handed her the nomination without any without any process, certainly without the kind of rigor of a primary process. I was a bit surprised. I mean, consider the win this morning, and I stayed up till about 2. I wanted to see a speech, and more on that in a moment, John. I think the concession speech and a victory speech in our country, in the United States, in a subnational election like we just had in Saskatchewan, in any election, is more telling and arguably more important, even though most folks have probably gone to bed, because of the message that it sends to the media that do follow it, but even more important than that, John, to that leader's party. Win or lose, your candidates are watching that speech. The people that will be part of your government at the political staff level, the senior bureaucracy you're inheriting, they are watching that speech, and you set a tone with it. And I wanted to hear what Trump had to say. I was hoping against hope that he wouldn't kind of spike the football and do what probably most people thought he would do. And I think actually it was a pretty by Trump standards, a pretty generous, magnanimous speech, kind of a uniting speech. And anyway, so I stayed up for that long, but the short answer or the medium long answer to your question is I was surprised at the win that looks like they flipped the Senate by 2, now maybe 3 seats, with Senator Tester just south of me right now in Montana going down to defeat to a former Navy SEAL Sheehy. That was the one that I think that gave them the 2-seat margin now in the Senate. Very important. Trump's win is clear. 277 electoral college votes now, getting closer to 300. I think when we finally get the last of the last of the states settled, and then the House. It looks like they're going to keep the House, and I'm not sure Canadians understand the importance of it. We run our first past the post system in a federal election, and the leader of the party that elects the most seats in the House of Commons is a de facto, if it's a majority, this sounds blunt, but you're kind of de facto dictator for 4 years. There are no checks and balances other than your own, that leader's own self-awareness and integrity. So if a person gets elected in Canada, at the provincial level or the federal level, they get a majority of the seats. They are unchallenged by some other level of government, by some other house of government. They are the leader of a majority government for 4 years. And in the United States, of course, it's different. You have the check and balance of the House, which is not always the same party as the president. In fact, I'd say it's usually not. And same with the Senate. And you need decisions, except for executive orders, which are limited in scope. You have to go through all of those parts of the system, all those checks and balances to get anything meaningful done, get your budget passed, to make major decisions for the American people. So People sort of mock that system because of the gridlock that can happen, and there can be a lot of gridlock. But I tell you what, Shaun, I would like to have a Senate in our country that was a real Senate and not a rubber stamp, that actually had some decision-making power and influence, and that was constructed on the same basis as the United States Senate. Because right now in Alberta and Saskatchewan, where is our remedy? If we have, as we have been for the last 8 years plus, if we are sort of at the whim and the will of a federal government and a prime minister that doesn't like how we make a living, and that dislike has manifested itself in policies that are literally damaging to how we like to make a living, disproportionately so to us than to somewhere else. Well, if we were in Montana, for example, we'd have 2 senators, and we could send a message through those senators, and that's the same number of senators, by the way, that California has. With all of those other members of the House, they still only get 2 senators. That check and balance alone would be really nice to have in our country. And so I'm barely remembering your original question, but I was very long story short. I'm surprised at the result, but it is a resounding win. And he has a mandate. He didn't just win, Shaun. This is important. We were lucky enough to win big majorities when I was in government. Very fortunate to win them. You get a mandate from those, which is a bit different than a win. A mandate is the people have given you the chance, the opportunity to do what you said you would do, and all of it, because you won it. And so now that's what Trump and the Republicans have.
Yeah, you point out a really good thing. They didn't just win the, one. They won 3, and they got the popular vote and everything. Like, it's just a clear sweep, and that points to a mandate of like, okay, go get things changed around for us.
Yeah,
and that to me seemed pretty clear early on last night as we did live election coverage. Being a Canadian and being, I didn't start this in grade 6. I was, I've been, thrown into fire, getting to talk to people such as yourself and others, and starting to learn how our political process works here in Canada. One of the things you said early on about, you were going to, at the end of your career of being the premier, is you were going to table a budget that was going to put in some cuts. People were going to be upset about it. And I'm curious about that, because I'm like, isn't that what conservatives want? Because I sit here as a newbie, and I listen to a guy who's been premier for 11 years, came in after the NDP, who everyone and their dog in Saskatchewan would say was the most disastrous government Saskatchewan's ever had. Maybe you would argue with me on that, but that's the story I've been told since I've been knee high. And I look at it and I go, okay, so when you came in, weren't you just cutting things and pulling things out and doing and moving fast? Or that's just not, I have a different idea of what pace of government is.
I think we made a lot of change quickly. We made 150 plus promises in that first campaign platform. By the way, in subsequent platforms, we did not make that many promises. We kept every single one of them. Large and small. So there were some major changes we made. In our province, we disproportionately relied on property taxes to fund education. And it was a disproportionate pain on rural Saskatchewan. And we campaigned on and therefore got sent with a mandate to make that major structural change. The graduate retention program that has now kept 80,000 young people in our province. We used to, you'll know this perhaps, or maybe old Quick Dick has shared it with you when he's been on the show, but the joke used to be in Saskatchewan, if what do you buy for a graduation present for someone graduating from a Saskatchewan high school? Used to be the joke was, you buy them luggage because they're gone. The graduate retention plan, and I hope other economic policies help to change that, and good fortune and good luck and good commodity prices. I think it's really important for politicians to give credit where it's due. And we worked hard in government to make sure, look, we've had all this success, but credit you, the people of Saskatchewan, credit commodity price strength, and hopefully our growth plan's helping. And in addition to that, we're getting out of the way of all of you as you build this new Saskatchewan. But to your point, we had an ambitious plan and program, and we made those changes. But that last budget was about, we'd always relied through the NDP in Saskatchewan, and the same in Alberta, through different governments, you relied disproportionately on resource revenue. So you got this whipsawing of of your budget cycle, depending on the price of oil, and if it crashes or potash isn't worth much in any particular cycle, or uranium prices crash, or even on the agriculture side, if you have a downturn there, your budget suffers immeasurably, and then you've gone from whatever a regular budget would be to one of austerity and of cuts in order to get somewhere close to a balanced budget. So we just wanted to make some changes there, and we cut the small business tax in that particular budget, but we, as I said off the top, and we increased the PST. Wasn't much fun doing that. That's not what conservatives want to do. But we just thought rather that this would help us stabilize the budgeting and the revenue source for the province if we weren't so reliant on resource revenue. And in times when resource prices were high, well, then we could actually put it away because we wouldn't be needing it to balance the budget.
When you look at, I come all the way down to like the smallest sense, like municipal politics, and you go revenue streams, right? The biggest revenue stream is taxation, right? I think you can correct me if I'm wrong. And then there's probably, commercial or business, but once again, it's a form of taxation. Is there, like, when you were in government and you're sitting there exploring all these ideas, is there different things that can pull in revenue that can actually ease the burden of taxing the common person, or is that just not the case?
And on the municipal side, it's basically your property tax, right? That's the revenue source. You're going to get a bit in fees and licenses, and it's not going to amount to anything too substantive. So it's property tax, and I guess there's one other revenue source that I'm kind of proud to point back to. The other thing, a fairly expensive thing we promised in advance of the 2007 election, Shaun, was to revisit and restore or ensure better revenue sharing with municipalities. And we did that. We found a simple formula. We tied it to one point of the PST, and we said, whatever 1% of the PST revenue is getting, that's the amount we're going to share on a per capita basis with rural and urban municipalities. And it was a big number, a big increase. And the challenge with that, we didn't do that because there's a lot of political upside to that. Other than, I think it was the right thing to do. We had promised to do it, right? And remember, the 8 most powerful words in politics are he did or she did or they did what they said they would do. We banked pretty heavy on that axiom, on that truth. And I would still say that, advise it today to people in politics. Even if people don't like the thing that you're promising, even if they think it's dumb, they give you credit if you kept that promise. Anyway, so the revenue sharing piece was part of that, and it's a big source of revenue for them. But by and large, they got the property, and that's it.
Fast forward then to this past Sask election. I think where it sits is 34-27. I think that was the last figures I saw. Sask
You're
party
right.
Sitting at 34 seats, 27 to the NDP. What are your thoughts on the Sask election?
Well, it's underreported. I was referenced a bit on election night, but underreported in all of this is the historic nature of the win. Other than my former chief of operations and director of communications, Kathy Young, was on the Saskatchewan CTV networks as one of the commentators, and she made this point very effectively, but nobody else really was. This is the 5th majority term for the Saskatchewan Party. In the modern era of politics, it doesn't happen. I mean, in Alberta, it happened up until when it stopped happening, and I'm not sure we'll get to that point in Alberta. I'll defer to others about Alberta politics. 5 majority governments, clear majority governments in the modern era, is a remarkable achievement by any political party. And so that, to me, is the top line. The top line news story is who won the election, and the subset of that, the slug line, if you will, would be, well, this is the 5th time that's happened, and no one else coming close to it in the country. The other storyline, of course, is the NDP gaining some seats in urban Saskatchewan and sweeping the city of Regina and getting everything but one in Saskatoon after that other second Saskatoon seat flipped when mail-in ballots were counted the next day. And so that's dominated the media narrative. Oh gosh, look at how the NDP swept this, and look how close the NDP are. I would just say this, and I mean, I think the new leader of the NDP, Carla Beck, has done a very good job. I think she's moderated her party. She's taken them back to the center to the extent she can from the more radical left that they were sort of moving to, or were there already, I guess, under the previous leader. So she did some good things, but they lost by double digits. They lost by double digits when the time for change number in Saskatchewan in any poll you were looking at was significant, very significant. And the margin of loss in those rural seats and the small urban, Swift Current, Estevan, North Battleford, Yorkton, except for Yorkton, were basically as yawning gaps as they ever were. So the seats they picked up, the seven of the 10 closest seats in the election in terms of margin of victory were NDP wins in those cities. Saskatchewan Party incumbents who lost their seat, or seats where there was an incumbent not running again, but it had been a Sask Party seat. Those were very, very close still. So then the question becomes, now what next? If the New Democratic Party loses the popular vote in Saskatchewan by double digits, when the time for change number is as high as it is, when the government's been around for 4 terms, and then by definition it has made some decisions that aren't real popular, because you have to. You've got all that going for you. When there's sort of momentum behind this momentum against incumbents right across Canada, and I'd argue North America, if you can't close the gap to something less than 12 points in a scenario like that, when are you going to be able to do it? New leader, pretty good leader, moderated the party, time for change is high, tough for incumbents, tough to win 4 terms, never mind 5, and you lost by double digits. And that's part of the story that's not been talked a little bit about. And Shaun, if you will, I mentioned off the top, we talked about Trump's speech here, but one of the most underreported, perhaps, or a part of an election campaign that gets the least focus is that speech, a concession speech or a victory speech. We have it on. I have it on some pretty good sources that Carla may have only had one speech written, that they were absolutely convinced they were going to win the election. We know a number of their MLAs. One in particular was at the Ryder game just before the election, telling people they were going to win 37 seats. I know another fellow that is a lawyer in Regina that was telling people he was going to be the chief of staff to Carla Beck when she became the premier. We know that they were sort of checking out the Ledge building itself for I mean, I guess akin to measuring the drapes in the offices. This is a very dangerous thing to do in politics, especially, and it tells you that maybe their own internal polling, like the public polling, was wrong.
It sounds like you're up 2-1 going into the third period of Game 7 of the Stanley Cup, and you're already celebrating, and you get beat 5-2, or you could put whatever number you want. You never celebrate until it's done.
Boy, that's the truth, and you focus until it's absolutely done. Prior to 2007, we had a transition team that I didn't. I appointed a transition team, a group of women and men who had experience in government, and we asked them, and it was chaired by the individual who become the deputy premier, the MLA for Cornerstone, Ken Kravets, just a great guy, and someone who went on to be an excellent cabinet minister and deputy premier. But so that process was going on, but in a way that wasn't presumptuous. In fact, I said, I don't even want to talk to you guys. I mean, just go ahead and do that work. We have to win this election. We have to earn it first. And I think the NDP really, really did get ahead of themselves in this election. I think there was only that one speech written, and then the one she gave has gotten hardly any coverage at all. And I'm going to just spend, if I can, a moment on this because I hope it illustrates my point. Whether you win or you lose, but especially if you win or even beat expectations, your job in that speech is to express humility. And after that, you express humility. And after that, you're humble and you're grateful and you're earnest. If you won the election, I believe you're humbly grateful and you're committing to earnestly earn the support, because you haven't earned anything yet on election night. You got those votes. But my approach was, That's the day you start to try to reach it, to earn the trust that Saskatchewan people gave you, for both those who voted for you and those that didn't. And that was in Scott Moe's speech. Scott Moe's election night speech from Shelburne, Saskatchewan, Canada, was outstanding. He had just won an historic 5th term, but he was earnest and he was grateful. And then he said something like, I'm paraphrasing, he said it better than I'm about to. He said he knew that he knew there was a lot of people that didn't vote for the Saskatchewan Party in this election, and he received the message that they sent, and he was going to work hard to earn back their trust. And that is the message. And here's why, as I said, here's why it's important. Off the top, we talked about Trump. That speech happens pretty late. Trump's was 2 a.m, and Scott's was late. Carla's was late. So really, how much really does it matter? Who's still up and who's still watching? Well, as I said before, the officials in your government, the unelected officials in your government are watching, or they will watch it later. Your colleagues, the MLAs that were elected, are watching. The MLAs, the candidates that lost, are watching. Their teams, the political nerds, the people that were volunteering, they're watching, and you are sending them a message, and you are setting the tone for your government. And I just think it's the most important. And by the way, to the extent other people are listening too, it's even more important to get that message out of earnestness and of humility. I don't know if you watched the speech by Miss Beck, but I didn't hear any of that. There was regret. She thought she was going to win. She basically intimated what we were just talking about, that she was thinking she was going to win. But whoever wrote that speech for her that night, and if they just wrote the one, they had just written maybe the victory speech and had to quickly cobble together a concession speech. They missed the most important part. And if I was the Saskatchewan Party, I would be reminding the leader of the opposition of that in the House, in question period. You had a chance to say to rural Saskatchewan that, notwithstanding all of these other preconditions for you to be more successful than you were, to do better than a 2-digit loss of the popular vote, you didn't do it. And you didn't say that night of the election, hey, rural Saskatchewan and small cities in Saskatchewan, we're clearly doing something wrong. And we're going to figure this out. And we're going to reach out to you. And we accept this result. And we're humbled by the support we did get, but we have to do better. There was none of that. And in the subsequent coverage of it, it's basically, I think in the commentary I've seen from those in the NDP, it's been the same, from the same sort of tone, lacking that self-awareness and lacking that earnestness to say we need to do better. But even more importantly, and we've seen it a little bit in the social media this morning from those on the Democratic side, the rank and file supporters of the NDP on social media, on X and elsewhere, well, what are they doing with that? Are they expressing humility, or gosh, we better do better by rural Saskatchewan, or figure out why we're not connecting and why we haven't earned their support? No, they were attacking rural Saskatchewan, for how they voted. You're a bunch of hillbillies. You don't know what you're doing. You're a bunch of rednecks, this, that, and the other thing, this long list of insults. I couldn't believe it. When I opened my phone, I expected some of it, but there was a lot of it. And that seemed to be the consensus view by the supporters, the volunteers, sort of the rank and file members of the NDP, was to attack that group. Shaun, that's not going to work. And if the Saskatchewan Party is successful, and I think they will be, in doing what Scott wants, which is to reconnect, which is try to earn back that support in enough places, in those 7 out of 10 really close races where they really lose by much, the Sask Party, I like his chances a lot better, or the Sask Party's chances a lot better in 4 years than I do the New Democrats. You've got to use election night, especially when you really were successful by reasonable measures, as Carl was. That is your chance to connect with Saskatchewan people and say, man, thank you for this support, but we know we got to do better, and we will.
Coming from a hockey background, it's the little things that win you championships. And being new, I can't believe I'm about to say this sentence. Being new to being a political nerd, is that something? Okay, for sure. You're. I didn't watch the concession speech. I never even thought to watch it. I watched Scott Moe talk. I watched Donald Trump his victory speech. I think I don't even kind of glaze over the other one. You're maybe teaching me a very valuable lesson this morning, that you should watch what the other side is saying, because that might be as important, if not more important, to where they're heading, in the future. And the fact they're attacking, I guess, doesn't surprise me. I mean, I watched last night. Who was it? I forget his name. He was on, I think it was CNN, and he talked about how it's a clear sign that Democrats, if they're smart, they take a look and realize how they've been talking to a portion of the American public, basically talking down to them. They don't know what they're doing, and everything you just said, Carla Beck and team were saying about rural Saskatchewan. Well, they get to vote too, and they're actually really smart. And when you offend them, now they're passionate and they go out and do what needs to get done. And we just saw it in the United States. And the fact that's what's in the concession speech of the NDP in Saskatchewan, I'm like, well, that ain't going to bode well, right? Like, I mean, that just isn't going to bode well.
Well, and I think that was Scott Jennings that you're referencing that said that on CNN. There was similar commentary on other things that I saw. I would just finish off the point about what some of the NDP supporters were saying on X about us rubes in rural Saskatchewan and how stupid we were. Sask Party. I hope someone in the Saskatchewan Party should be bookmarking every one of those posts, because I would be using them. I would be using them in the future. So you make a great point about maybe the Democrats and maybe other sort of more liberal or left of center political parties and movements in North America are making that particular mistake of not understanding the perspective of families, middle-class families especially. Yesterday, apparently, and I think that, I'm not sure if these numbers still held, but quite late into the evening, in Florida, they were breaking down the numbers of both African-American vote and Hispanic vote. And African-American vote for Trump had doubled at that point. Maybe that's changed. African-American men voting for Trump doubled over what they did in 2020 for him. And the Hispanic numbers were similar. And apparently across the United States, in major cities, well, Miami-Dade, in that same state, but in other major cities in the U.S., that similar trend was happening. And it was interesting to watch some of the commentators on CNN just be completely flummoxed by this. How can this be? How can Trump be doing better among African American males or Hispanic males or African Americans period and Hispanic folks period? And he had improved in Arizona amongst Hispanics as well last night over 4 years ago. Well, how about stop looking at them by the color of their skin or their ethnicity? I would say to those Democrats that were scratching their head, their families. Those African American men are dads. Those Hispanic men and their moms and dads, and they have concern about affordability, and they have concern about inflation, and that would be probably their top two concerns. And a lot of them have a concern about immigration and security, obviously from the exit polls, the security of their person and their property.
Well, I might
go ahead.
I might add one in, Brad, because we've seen it here in Canada, right? Normally, Muslims and Christians are kind of on opposite ends. But when they had the 1 million March for Children, right, of stay out of the family, stay away from the children, let the parents decide on what happens with our children and all this gender stuff. What did you see? You saw Muslims and Christians march together. And I'm like, oh, man, this is something, because that doesn't make any sense. But when you go down to what you just said, these people are dads and their moms. And when we talk like that, all of a sudden we all care for our children and we can all get aligned real fast. And I think that's a really interesting point. And I might add, Quick Dick and Vance Crowe and Steve Barber once upon a time were on stage for me and Lloyd, and we were talking about the rural-urban divide. And how do you get them to come together? Because, obviously people in the city think similar things to the person living out in the country. There's different things going on, for sure. But maybe you've just pointed out something that when you treat them when you get down to some of the core issues about, like you said, inflation and cost of living, but other things that are now starting to impact the family, maybe that is where you're going to start to see cities and rural and urban, start to align on things.
It could well be. It could well be that's one of them. And I think the political party that continues to campaign or to construct their campaigns and their marketing communications around identifiable groups of people, separate and distinct from each other by the color of their skin or their faith or indigenous or not, they're gonna find it hard to win. And I think last night showed us that. I think so the Saskatchewan election showed us that as well. They only remember there's a 2-digit lead for the Sask party. They were very, very close in a lot of those urban ridings where they'll try to win next time. And I wonder if it's these sort of family related issues that helped close an otherwise larger gap that they may have been facing there. So I just think that that the political party that just starts connecting with, communicating to, offering promises for families, regardless of all these other considerations, is going to be the party that's most successful. I would also, one other thing in Saskatchewan, I'm not sure it's like that in Alberta next door. It might be getting close. The NDP brand in Saskatchewan is broken. And I know the brand talk is cliche and we all, we talk in terms of branding and branding narratives and all that stuff. And it's kind of annoying and it's cliche, but it's cliche kind of because it's true. That's how something becomes a cliche, really. So branding in politics is important. And what is that? What is the brand of the orange and black in Saskatchewan of the NDP? In rural Saskatchewan, it ain't good. It ain't good. And there's a bunch of reasons for it. It's tied to their record when they were in government, when they had to make some tough budget decisions, and all of them seem to be, the pain of those decisions, all of them seem to be visited on rural Saskatchewan in terms of school closures, hospital closures, and less of the pain shared by other places. And whether that's right or wrong, that's part of the brand. It's part of the brand. The decline, the population issues that buy your kid a piece of luggage for graduation, that's all part of their brand. For good or for ill, for fair or not, that's part of their brand. The gentleman that I replaced, a really good man, Lauren Calvert, Premier of Saskatchewan, used to call Saskatchewan the wee place. One of his cabinet ministers used to say of our plan to grow the province by 1% a year, our population by 1% a year, 100,000 people in 10 years, was statistically impossible and was foolish. That's part of their brand. This notion, the NDP's notion, at least in rural Saskatchewan, that, you know what, we're just the wee province. We're always going to be in and out of equalization. We really can't grow it. We couldn't even grow it at the national average in terms of population. By the way, Shaun, they were right. We didn't grow at 1% at the national average. We exceeded it. We exceeded in the first 7 years. We hit that target. And I don't say we, the Sask party. I mean, we, the province of Saskatchewan. But all of that's part of their brand in rural Saskatchewan. Here's the other thing that's part of the brand. Jagmeet Singh is part of the brand.
Thank you.
No bueno. And this notional tie of the modern NDP to the radical left in this country is part of their brand. That is going to be a challenge for them in rural Saskatchewan. I would argue a challenge for them in rural Alberta as well. And maybe they should have changed their name. Maybe they should have been the Saskatchewan Democratic Party and said, look, we are not that. We are not the federal wing. We want nothing to do with them. And we're not going to be associating with the elite manifesto and some of this craziness that we did get associated with because some of our more radical provincial NDP members went to the various conventions. The brand is not good in rural Saskatchewan. And I don't know how you fix that because you can have a better leader. She is. You can have better policy. They've been presenting it. But out here where I live in the country, that brand is busted.
Well,
and I'm not sure it's terrible.
You inherit everything before you. And the NDP name with people my age and older, for sure. I don't know how much younger it goes. I've always been curious about that, like how much younger than me, because I was born in 86, right? So like all my formative years are under NDP government. It's like we and living on the border, we're just on a farm 20 kilometers into Saskatchewan. You could literally walk across the border and see what Alberta had and be like, what is going on? We live that close to it.
You live the object lesson. That is the app. I used to use it in speeches. There was this other great map too that showed oil and gas development in Saskatchewan and Alberta. and the area where there was development was shaded in red. Townships of land shaded in red, and there was a line where the red stopped. I mean, even though there's always been a healthy oil and gas industry in Lloydminster, comparatively speaking, or down the west side, comparatively speaking, the color changed from red to pink to sometimes white. And I used to make the joke in speeches. I'd put it up on a slide and say, "See right here, folks. This is the line. This is the line where the dinosaurs stopped dying. They didn't die over here, but they just died over here."
Yes.
And I know people would also say to me, it's the food they ate that created the oil. Whatever. You always get someone.
If I may, with a couple more minutes before I let you out of here, Brad, one of the things when you talk about the NDP and like they inherit all the things before them, I just go, well, if you're my age, probably a few years younger than me, you lived through it, and it's hard to get you to change it, not forget that, right? No matter how good a speaker they got. And I might argue this, the Sask party is case in point, right? Because before you had the NDP in power, you had the Progressive Conservatives. They got tied up in a bunch of, I don't know the story because it's well before my time, but a bunch of legal court cases, etc. And if you look at the Conservative Party of Saskatchewan, like I think that's what they're called, right? They I don't even know how many candidates they ran this election. Did they run any candidates? That's where they're at. And what you had was a new form coming after that took liberals and conservatives and put them together, became the Sask party. It took time, and then eventually you've become government. So when you take that model and you go, the NDP are inheriting everything they've done. If they rebranded, could they find a way? Maybe they could. But right now,
I hope, put it this way, I hope they don't. And I don't think they will. Because I think they should, but I don't think they will. And you're right. The PC party brand was also irreparably damaged. And so a bunch of the progressive conservative MLAs in 1997 just said, let's sit down with our colleagues on the liberal side of the aisle and see if we can hammer something new out. And I think it's important, by the way, that the Saskatchewan Party remembers its roots, that we are an amalgam of provincial conservatives, but also provincial liberals, remembering that provincial liberals in Saskatchewan have always been much more conservative or market-oriented than federal liberals, right? We think of Ross Thatcher versus Pierre Trudeau. That illustrates my point. But it still was two parties that came together. It's why we were able to build into some strength in urban Saskatchewan, which I still believe is there, notwithstanding the seat count. And but it's important for us, in my view. I think it's important for a party to remember its roots, especially if they're good roots, if they're healthy roots, and these ones are. And we'll see going. I think that's what's going to happen. Like I go back to Scott's speech that night. That was my. You'd think, well, the best part for Wall on election night must have just been when they finally declared the win, or when he was watching the seat count go up. No, it was Scott's speech. It was excellent, and I know because I know the kind of guy Scott. I had appointed Scott to the cabinet as my environment minister. He was the actual first sort of guy to walk out on a carbon tax announcement by the federal government. He's walked out on it now, literally and figuratively. He does what he says. He's got that, those 8 most powerful words. He does what he says he'll do. And so when he said that on election night from Shelbrooke, I was like, yeah, this is going to be okay. And I'm glad he's the premier.
One final one for you. You'd said, this is the 5th, correct? Fifth in a row?
Yeah.
And you said it's pretty historic for Saskatchewan. When you look over at Alberta, they've had some governments run a long time. So it's not so shocking when you look across the border because, I mean, they you go back to Ernest Manning and that group of people.
Well, 40% of conservatives. I'm not sure that's that's repeatable.
Well, that's my question then. Why isn't it repeatable? Why is it that you can't have because when you look at Saskatchewan, or I'll take Alberta, I'll pick on Alberta. It's a sea of blue. They all want conservative government in. Why can't you have that for the next, I don't know, maybe not 100 years, but why is 5 terms so historic? Yeah. Why is that?
Because I think modern conservatives generally split off from each other more easily than they did. And we just saw Daniel Smith come through a leadership review with an amazing number, and one that surprised me. I thought she would be okay, but over 90%, 91%.
91.5%. I was in the building.
Right. When she faces this, there's always someone a bit further on the right, who haven't heard that the enemy the enemy of the good is the pursuit of perfection. So if you're a conservative out there and the party that you supported that's in power now is not getting every single perfect, little thing that you wanted done perfectly done, because maybe they have to worry also about the center. Well, it's just, we're going to start a new party, or we're going to agitate against it in a leadership review or try to. I think there's a greater propensity, this just being on the right than there is on the left, for those kinds of splits. And I think it makes it harder. I mean, they didn't actually turn out to do much in this last provincial election in Saskatchewan, but you had two parties, right? You have the Buffalo Party and the Sask United Party. There was still the Progressive Conservative Party. It's a lot of parties. Plus, I also think people are, in this modern era, they're more apt. Let's try something new. There's the time for change thing is really difficult to overcome, and Scott was able to do it. And but Kamala Harris was not able to do it. Time for change is tough. I think it's tougher now than it was back in the 44-year conservative heyday in Alberta, and also when there was no alternative. Since Notley, you've got kind of. I mean, I wouldn't support them, especially with. I'd be very wary of Nenshi, but you've got a strong opposition, a large number. You do have an alternative that's there, where you haven't had that. You didn't in those 44 years really have much in Alberta in the way of. For a while, when Klein won that tight one, that was about as even as it was in your house there. But for most of those 44 years, the opposition was small. There's no immediate alternative, even for the person that's thinking, I think we should probably have a change. So I think there's a lot of factors into it. I strongly believe that 5 majority governments is rarefied air. It's tough to. And in Saskatchewan, you make a good point. It did happen here. Tommy Douglas in the CCF, 5 terms, and that was in 1960. That was when it ended.
Asking a political nerd, what's one thing that you think people new into politics, if they were, I don't know. I'll leave this pretty wide open. I don't know if it's something you should read, something you should follow, something you should watch. Little things that you think add up to big things. The concession speech is interesting to me. I'm going to go watch it now because I'm like, oh, I should probably just go watch it. If it stuck out to you, a guy who has spent his life around politics, I'm like, guy needs to do that. But if you were to be like, well, if you're interested in Canadian politics specifically, because as you pointed out, we are very different than the United States. Where would you point a guy?
That's the most important thing, or
I don't know. I don't know about most important. I don't know if I love that wording. I just think like you've been around politics a long time. What is it that you think really helps formulate thoughts or your viewpoint on watching politics play out?
Well, I think we have some common ground with our friends in the U.S. At least those, I'm pretty comfortable and familiar with places like Montana, North Dakota, and they're just right over the border. And I think we're the same in this sense. And we actually talked about this before. What do you want for your family, Shaun, from government? And what would you like them to just stay away from, to butt out of? Those are probably 2 important questions you could ask. And the answer that you give to those 2 questions, what would you like from your government for your family that would make things better for you and your family? And what would you like them to stay away from and not touch for your family? That's probably pretty indicative of what your friends would say if asked that same question, or strangers that live in your community would say if asked that same question. These are the things that we want. And politicians and those of us that are political nerds, we talk in terms of left and right. Maybe a more conventional politician might answer your question just now with, well, you need to look for these right-wing principles and policies. nobody on Coffee Row talks in those terms. Ronald Reagan famously said when he switched from being a Roosevelt Democrat and the head of a union, the head of the Screen Actors Guild, to evolving into this voice for free enterprise and conservatism, and eventually maybe the most successful Republican politician of the last 100 years in the United States, at least after Teddy Roosevelt. They asked him, how can you make that switch? How can you be a Roosevelt New Deal Democrat one day, and then a couple of days later you're Republican? How can you move that far left, from left to right? And Reagan says, I don't think in terms of left and right. I think in terms of up and down. I believe there are certain policies that will lift people up, and I believe there are policies that will bring people down, and I'm in favor of up. And I'm paraphrasing that, but that's basically it. And so I think that's important. That's part of the answer to this question. Well, what should you look for? You should look for, look for the party whose platform, whose commitments would lift you and your family up, and also leave them alone where it's important that government leave families alone. And you're probably going to find that that's very representative of a large cohort, of a large group of people. And enough, if you're in politics and you happen to find a way to engage in those terms, you're going to probably be successful.
Appreciate you hopping on and doing this, Brad. I hope it's not the only time we ever get to sit and chat. When we first started, you said nobody wants to listen to you. I'm like, I think between your ears, you got a lot of knowledge that I'd love to share with people and ask questions and pull on. And certainly when I speak of Saskatchewan politics, because in Alberta, they always talk about Klein, and in Saskatchewan, they always talk about Wall. That's from my eyes, the way I see it. Either way, really appreciate you giving me some time this morning.